we know? We're still expecting him, though.
He said yes.
The panel is first is and then we ask questions each time they meet. Is that what you know?
We just got things started. Okay, fine. So when we sit here, we should do this. Yes.
George. Hi, John Ellingson.
John, nice to meet you. Good to see you again. It's been a long time. It certainly has. This drink over there. This one.
I would like to welcome all of you to this Workers' Rights Board hearing here in Missoula, Montana. This is the Montana Workers' Rights Board hearing, concerning issues of dispute between the Missoula Police Association and the City of Missoula. Here tonight, on Thursday, June 7th, the Workers' Rights Board of the Montana Community Labor Alliance is holding a hearing to look at the issues that are involved. Several members of the Workers' Rights Board are here, and I will introduce those in a few moments. But I'd first like to introduce myself. My name is Frank Kremkowski. I'm the co-chair of this particular hearing. And I'd also like to introduce the other co-chair, Rita Jankowski Bradley of Missoula, to explain more about the Workers' Rights Board so that you'll understand what kind of board we are, where we're coming from, what our mission is. Rita?
Okay. I'm going to read the mission statement. The Montana Workers' Rights Board was established to support and enhance the democratic rights of working people. The Worker Rights Board provides the community's moral voice for the economic issues upon which justice for working men and women rests. Existing laws and practices provide very little protection for workers who are treated unfairly or try to organize collectively. Workers need a community-based alternative to existing institutions like the National Labor Relations Board, the EEOC, and the Human Rights Commission to build broad community support for workers' legal right to organize and bargain collectively. The primary goal of the Workers' Rights Board is to respond quickly and effectively to incidents where employers abuse the rights of working people. In so doing, we hope to create a climate in which the denial of workers' rights will not be tolerated, and de facto community standards of workplace justice will be created and enforced through broad community pressure. Activities of the Worker Rights Boards include investigating complaints from workers regarding unfair treatment, discrimination, and suppression of democratic collective activity, exerting community pressure and moral persuasion to encourage democratic and fair behaviors from employers, developing public statements of principle which foster community support for labor issues, including the right to organize and bargain collectively, and workplace justice generally. Raising public awareness of the workers' rights under the law in America and encouraging the strengthening of legal and democratic rights for working people. The Montana Workers' Rights Board is a project of the Montana Community Labor Alliance, Montana Jobs with Justice chapter. Members of the board include leaders from the civic, legal, academic, and religious communities.
I'd like to share just a brief history of the activities of the board. The board has been in existence now for about 15 months, and we have held 2 hearings. One was held in April of the year 2000, at a time when the stock market was still going up and everybody was telling us how wonderful the economy was and how everything was going to get better and better and better. What we did was to have a hearing in which we actually heard from workers across the state and from the state's gubernatorial candidates concerning the actual perceptions of the economic conditions of workers in Montana. That hearing, as well as our second hearing, were videotaped and are available for review by anybody who's interested in looking at the actual history. In the second hearing, held this last summer in Kalispell, the topic of the hearing was the conditions of workers who were trying to organize a union at Grouse Mountain Lodge in Whitefish, Montana. The union asked the Workers' Rights Board to come to Kalispell to hear testimony concerning the activities of the Grouse Mountain management. 6 or 7 members of the board from all across the state heard that testimony. Testimony consisted of workers who described in great detail how they were harassed, spied on, intimidated, refused basic training in using, for example, chemical cleaners. Workers who were bribed by the management to stay away from union organizing activity. Workers were spied on at their homes. All sorts of activities that were outrageous. We also heard the testimony that the National Labor Relations Board had issued a decision back in 1998 ordering the Grouse Mountain Lodge management to cease and desist from these violations of workers' rights under the law. And after hearing that testimony, we considered that testimony and unanimously voted to call for an economic boycott of Grouse Mountain Lodge, a national economic boycott. That resolution of ours was taken to the Montana AFL-CIO convention last summer and also voted in support at that time. And that boycott is underway at the moment. We just heard the good news that under an appeal of that decision by the management of Grouse Mountain Lodge, 12 of the 13 issues that were appealed were lost by the Grouse Mountain Lodge and won by the Workers' Union, the Hospital and Employees Restaurant Union of Whitefish. So we're very happy that that initial action in support of workers' rights has again been taken. But we won't be satisfied until all activities, in fact, do cease, because there was a National Labor Relations Board decision back in 1998 that was systematically ignored and violated. Unacceptable behavior in the United States, or in Colombia, or in Honduras, or wherever it happens. We don't anticipate that the issues here in Missoula are anything comparable to those egregious behaviors of the Grouse Mountain Lodge, which we described in our statement as immoral and unjust, and as well as illegal. But we are here to listen to the testimony of people who have been invited to present both sides of the issue. The City of Missoula has been invited and has declined actually to participate in person, but have given us a statement dated June 7th, which I will read at a later point in the testimony from Mayor Mike Cadiz. I'd like to introduce this evening's panel. About half of the Workers' Rights Board is able to come this evening, but we do have 6 of us here who have traveled from various parts of the state, including right here from Missoula, who will hear the testimony and then we'll convene or to deliberate, and then we'll come back later this evening to present what findings we can. To the far left, panel member Professor Richard Barrett from the University of Montana, here in Missoula, is an economics professor and member of the Workers' Rights Board. To his right is State Senator John Ellingson, member of the State Senate here in Montana, also from Missoula. To Mr. Ellingson's right is Mr. George Waring, who is Professor of History and Government at Montana Tech in Butte. Immediately to my left is our co-chair, Rita Jankowski Bradley of Missoula. Rita is a nutritionist who works as a professional nutritionist here in Missoula and has been involved for the past 20 years in a variety of organizations and activities concerning peace, economic justice, and human rights. To my right is Reverend Bob Holmes, a retired United Methodist minister from Helena, formerly chaplain at Rocky Mountain College, and a pastor at various congregations in Montana and across the United States. My own background, Frank Kromkowski, is that I'm from Helena. I'm the coordinator of the Helena Service for Peace and Justice, which is an affiliate of the national organization called the FOR, the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which is the nation's oldest interfaith organization working for nonviolence, human rights, and economic justice, founded in 1914. And I've been active in the FOR for the past 35 years. Our agenda for this evening is to first have a presentation of witnesses, followed by questions from the board. We'll have 2 separate panels. And then after that panel, after both of those panels have presented their testimony and the board has had a chance to ask whatever questions members of the board have, Then I will read the letter from Mayor Mike Kadish that was given to us to be presented at this hearing. And then at 8:15, what we will do, rather than simply closing the hearing at that point, will be to allow an additional 15 minutes of testimony from anybody from the audience who is here who has additional comments to make. Our ground rules for this particular phase of the hearing will be that the presentation has to be something new, something that has not already been presented by any of the members of the panel or has been addressed in some detail by a member of the Workers' Rights Board. So that's rule number one. Second rule is that we're allowing 15 minutes. There are a large number of people here, so we want to restrict everyone who is going to make a comment, something new, to 30 seconds each. Our watches are not exactly going to cut you off at 32 seconds, but we'd ask you to think about what you have to say and say. The third rule is that we want to alternate during that point between persons who have who oppose the position of requiring binding arbitration by the city and the city police union, and those who support that. So after, at 8:15, we'll have people identify themselves as either proponents or opponents and give you a chance to hear as well. We will then convene as a board in another room to discuss what we have heard, and then we'll come back at about 8:45 or thereabouts, close to that as we can, to announce what we have decided. And our decision may be that we support one side or the other of this issue, or that we need more time to discuss the issues and we'll convene again, or whatever we do decide. The Workers' Rights Board is a project of the Montana Community Labor Alliance, and that is a chapter of the national organization called Jobs with Justice. It's a coalition of 23 community organizations across the state, including unions, some were other community organizations. We're dedicated to building active solidarity in the fight for social justice. We're committed to truthfulness, so that we have not predetermined what it is that we're going to decide. We want to hear testimony on all sides. We are sorry that a representative of the city was not able to find the way to participate this evening, but we are grateful for having a statement from Mayor Kadish that we will read later. I'd like to turn now to the first panel and have the panel members introduce themselves and then present their testimony. And then after all testimony of the three members of the panel is presented, then I will ask members of the Workers' Rights Board to ask any questions that they do have. I'd like you to begin.
My name is Tim Burt. I'm the president of the Missoula Police Association.
My name is Jason Hunsinger. I'm a patrolman with the City of Missoula Police Department.
And I'm Ed Brunsvold. I'm a firefighter for the City of Missoula, a member of Local 271.
Proceed with your testimony, please.
First off, I'd like to thank you all for coming here tonight. I know you all have busy schedules, and it's much appreciated. I'd like to give you a little bit of background on the history of our association. We've been in existence since 1941. Our main function as a police protective association is to protect the livelihood and the working conditions of our member officers. A big part of what we do, too, is with the youth of Missoula. Since 1975, our youth committee has donated over $200,000 to various youth-related charitable organizations and is also a major contributor to the annual all-night senior party. In addition to that, many of our officers volunteer with youth in other areas, such as Adopt a Cop, coaching youth sports, youth advisory council, plus several others. I've been the president since 1999. I've been with this department for 11 years. Talking about the contract, what brought us here tonight is the contract negotiations that we're currently in with the city right now. Contracts normally, historically, have run 2 years. We do 2-year contracts. We started negotiating with the city back in March of 2000, over 14 months ago, in anticipation of our contract, the then current contract, expiring at the end of June 2000. We're now coming up on nearly 1 year without an agreeable contract for our workers. In April, we were told by the city that the city commission salary survey, which both sides were using as a basis for wage talks, would be completed by the end of April or May. We did not get these figures from the city until September of 2000. In the meantime, we worked on the other non-financial issues that we had pertaining to us. We have met, over 14 months, we've met 17 times with the city. The mayor has been present at the last 4 of those. At no time in my recent memory, since I've been with this department, has a contract ever gone. They always expire June 30th of that year. We've never had one go past the new year until now. And we've never been up to a year without a contract like we have, so we're breaking new ground for all of us. In regards to negotiations, how we got to this point, we're down to basically the one issue, and that's the issue that you're here to decide on and listen to. We initially polled all of our members we had 20 issues, and we wanted them to rank them from 1 to 20, 1 being the most important to them, 20 being the least important. We pared those down to about 8 to 10 requests that we were going to go to the city with and start negotiations. With that in mind, the top issues per our members in that poll were wages, binding arbitration, and a fair promotion policy. In the last 14 months, obviously, we've given quite a bit on all of those. We initially were asking for a 5% increase a year to our pay matrix for each of the 2 years on the contract. When it became apparent the city was not going to move on wages, we withdrew our request of a 5% raise and agreed to the city's request we pay additional monies for our dependent health care coverage for our spouses and our children, which we've never had to do in the past. We acquiesced on these important issues contingent on the city granting us binding interest arbitration. Our members felt that binding interest arbitration was the linchpin of any deal. We felt that it was important enough that we were going to give on the health insurance issue and pull back our wage requests. Officer Hunsinger is going to explain the arbitration and how the issue pertains to us and why we feel it's so important.
I again wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight. I know it's a pretty big commitment to come out here and listen to our issues right now, and I do appreciate it sincerely. I know there are several different kinds of binding arbitration. The proposal that we have made to the city from day one, which we have not amended at all to this point, is that we will begin looking at binding arbitration only when all of our contract negotiations and all of our good faith bargaining and collective meetings have failed. It's a last resort. My understanding of the fire department's use of binding arbitration, since they do have binding arbitration, is in the past 10 years, my understanding is they've used it twice. So it's not something that is regularly used as a tool in negotiations. The core of any negotiation is good faith bargaining, and we understand that and we appreciate that. Once we get to that point of the binding arbitration, if we do get to that point, our proposal has been that we will select or receive a list of a minimum of 5 different arbitrators. We initially proposed from anywhere in the region, not necessarily limited to Montana, and I think kind of a concern for that was perhaps in some larger metropolitan areas, they might have some more experience in issues like this as opposed to Montana arbitrators. The proposal that we're giving back to the city tomorrow, we've amended that portion to agree to a Montana arbitrator. So once we receive the list of the 5 arbitrators, we would alternately strike a name from the list until we reach the last arbitrator that we would both mutually agree on. That arbitrator's decision, we would go through a normal hearing on the issues. But another important fact of that is even once we reach that point, before we actually begin the hearing on binding arbitration, it doesn't preclude the city or the association getting together to meet and try to work out the details of the issues. The arbitrator will only decide on or hear testimony about issues that are unresolved in our contract negotiations. His only choices will be our final offer and the city's final offer. We're not asking him to come in and audit the budget for the city. We're not asking him to come in and make new policies and rules. I mean, we run the police department, the mayor runs the city. We're asking an outside party to come in, professional, which is their job, to come in and just evaluate the evidence that we present, statistics, facts, and then make a decision between those two issues, either our proposal or the city's proposal. Binding arbitration is not uncommon at all. In fact, California just passed last year. It was a bill proposed by Senator Burton. California now passed binding arbitration for all police and fire. And a press release by Senator Burton basically stated that it's a safeguard, it's a fair way to resolve any disputes, not to take the place of contract negotiations, but resolve any disputes while still thinking about the public's welfare. Currently, our plan of collective bargaining is that the city can unilaterally impose its last offer, whether we accept it or not, which in my opinion perhaps takes a little bit of the fairness away from it on their side. They don't necessarily come into it thinking we need to sit and get this resolved. They're thinking this is what, in the back of their minds, I believe, will be our final offer, and at that point, we can impose it, whether they want it or not. Our whole basis for binding arbitration is that it sort of levels the negotiation table, in my opinion, or in our opinion. The city does have that authority now. Our proposal would allow a neutral party to come in here, perhaps has some biases. Everyone's human. Perhaps he has some collective or categorical biases. But the point is that we don't know him. He doesn't know us. He's a professional coming in to do a job, and all he has to go on is a testimony that each side presents to him. We really think that it would be a good benefit. I mean, we're not all attorneys. We haven't been to law school. We're not professionals in negotiations. We're here to do the job that we've been hired for. And spending 14 months in the boardroom negotiating a contract does nothing but lower morale in the department and start to lead to some type of sentiment between the city administration and the police department, thinking they're not coming into it negotiating fairly. So I think this is a strong way for us to actually resolve any type of issues before it gets to that point to where we are looking at perhaps some type of work-related action. To kind of elaborate on our current proposal, or on our current collective bargaining, the way we are now, as I mentioned, is the city has the authority to unilaterally impose its last offer, whether we accept it or not. When we go into any negotiations, and that is the rule, it really leaves us with only one option for recourse, and that is to withhold our services. We haven't done that in the past. No one wants to do that, really, but if we get backed into a corner where we're not being heard and our offers aren't seriously being considered, it really leaves no other option for us. With the binding arbitration that we've proposed, it strictly prohibits any type of work-related action like that on our part, so we're also proposing something that would prevent us from doing anything that might affect the community in that way. Overall, I think what we've proposed for binding arbitration is a very complete package. It takes into account the community, which is the most important thing on any city, and it allows us to just get in there and negotiate and not worry about any type of outside influences affecting our negotiations.
I'm Ed Brunsvold. I've been a firefighter in Missoula for 15 years, and as some of you may know, firefighters have binding arbitration per Montana State Code. We've had it for some time. Jason explained the process very well. That was going to be my part here tonight, was to talk about the process of binding arbitration. So I'd like to offer a little bit of history of the times that firefighters have used binding arbitration. I've been a firefighter for 15 years, and arbitration has only been used 2 times in my 15 years. It's only as a last resort. It's only after impasse is reached. Our contract reads that we then call in a mediator, and if a mediator can't work with the 2 sides to resolve the issues, then we both consent to submit the remaining issues to an arbitrator for decision. And I'm going to go right to, in the 2 times that we've used it, I'm certain that the issues that remain on the table would have resulted in a strike by the firefighters had we not had binding arbitration. I don't personally believe that that's a strike by public safety personnel is in anybody's best interest. Interestingly, the last time we went through arbitration, the item remaining on the table, the principal item that caused the firefighters to vote to go to arbitration and spend that amount of money, was a non-economic issue. It was concerning shift trading, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but the city came in with what we considered an unreasonable stance on the issue, could not justify their position, and would not back down on it. It was very near and dear to the hearts of the firefighters, and that's the reason that we chose to go to arbitration. We were successful in that arbitration on that issue. The city was successful in some other items in the arbitration. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is that I don't agree that an arbitrator, the arbitrator that is selected for this process, brings a lot of biases to the case. I think that the United States has a judicial system, and I think a lot of people in that judicial system would be a little bit offended to say that they can't come into a room and listen to testimony and make an objective decision based on the testimony presented. Also, in this process of selecting the arbitrator, 5 names are selected, and you better believe that my International Association of Firefighters Union tracks the decisions of those arbitrators every single time. Likewise, I am certain that the Leagues of Cities and Towns does the same thing. There is adequate safeguards there to keep a wild or erratic decision coming down from an arbitrator. These people do not take this process lightly. If they render a decision that is erratic one way or the other, they are certain to be struck from any list that they are selected on of the 5 names. So it's a good system. It's a fair system, and I'm thankful that we have it. I've enclosed some stuff for you folks to look at, some excerpts from the decision from our 93-95 contract in which we went to arbitration. I was hoping that this would just demystify the process a little bit and show that the arbitrator comes in, he listens to both parties, he notes that the parties negotiated many items and came to resolve those issues, and that there's a couple left that they can't resolve. He takes testimony from both sides. As much time as is needed is offered both sides, and there's cross-examination. It's very much like going to court. It's a very fair process, and it keeps it out of, this method of resolving issues keeps it out of the public eye, keeps it from going to the media, and the issue is resolved fairly. There are rules for the arbitrator in the firefighters setup. There are rules and precedents for the arbitrator to use just to decide. And they're listed in the code, and they're listed in Montana State Code, and they're listed in our contract. In Montana State Code 39-34-103, Section 5A says, in arriving at a determination, the arbitrator shall consider any relevant circumstances, including comparison of hours, wages, conditions of employment of the employees involved with employees performing similar services and with other services generally. B, the interests and welfare of the public, and here's an important one, the financial ability of the public employer to pay. That's a significant item. This arbitrator must indeed consider if the city can afford to pay the requests of the employees. C, he must consider the appropriate cost of living indices, and D, any other factors traditionally considered in the determination of hours, wages, and conditions of employment. On that note, on the comparison of hours and wages, I'd like to offer that firefighters and police officers are very similar in every city in Montana, the Northwest, and for the most part, the United States. Our jobs are very similar. It is very easy to come up with fair comparisons for these jobs across the state, whatever area or region is selected to become involved in the arbitration, be it statewide or regionally. These aren't jobs that have a lot of variance in their job duties and job descriptions. So you can get good data to present, both sides can get good data to present to the arbitrator for the decision. In the private sector, let's take auto manufacturing. A monetary dispute resulting in a labor strike has natural consequences for both labor and management. Production stops, affecting the bottom line for the company, income stops for its union members. Something is going to give eventually. The public is at best inconvenienced, and there may be local financial impacts for small businesses, grocery stores, that sort of thing, but public safety is not put at risk. In the area, if firefighters, police officers have to resort to a strike, there is too much risk. During a strike, crime continues, fires continue to start, people continue to have car accidents, people get suddenly ill. For this reason, binding arbitration is a good way to resolve these issues without putting the public safety at risk, public citizens at risk, and I believe that we should, I hope this board will support the police officers in their request for binding arbitration. I can offer any answers to questions you might have. I'm not a labor attorney by any means, but if there's any questions you would like to ask, I'd be willing to help. Thanks.
Do the witnesses have any other comments that you'd like to make? I may have forgot to make the first time you had a chance.
Yes. I would just like to say that, just to firm up what Ed said, and that was one thing I wanted to bring up, our main point of doing this and requesting binding arbitration was because of the public safety. We are involved, the city's involved, but the main thing is the public safety. The only option we have when we get to this point and the city decides to unilaterally impose their last best offer is to either accept it or strike. As a police officer sworn to uphold public safety and to protect the people and property of this fair city, that puts you in a real bad position. I don't think it's a position that we as law enforcement officers should be put in. I think that's probably why the legislature back in 1983 passed this law for the firefighters. I wish they would have included us too. But that's water under the bridge. So that's the main thing, is it prevents strikes, keeps police on the job, and keeps public safety number one. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. In part, some of my questions are related to what I understand the city's position is right now. One of my questions is this. Do you traditionally, in your negotiations, have any restrictions on or conditions on reopening when you negotiate your next contract? Or is the whole contract automatically open? In other words, for example, I've negotiated for the University Teachers Union a number of times, and occasionally, for example, have said, when we reopen this contract, when it expires, we'll have, each side can open 5 items or something like that. Do you have any kind of restrictions like that? Or could the city or the union, if they wanted to, reopen this language at a future date? Is there any restriction on that?
This is the first negotiation I've been involved in as president. My understanding of it is that there is no restrictions. Everything is open to negotiation or renegotiation.
So my question here goes to the city's proposal about sort of sunsetting this thing. If it's used the city is proposing now to sunset it. If it's used, then it goes out of the contract and can't get back in. But in fact, the city or the union could go into any subsequent negotiation with taking the position that it should go out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Another question I have is, do you have binding grievance arbitration in your contract right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and my third question is, does your proposal for, I think I understand that your proposal is for last best offer arbitration on each issue in contention separately. And that's that's the way the firemen do it, right? Is that the way the city, the police are proposing?
Yes.
And do you also have in your proposal language similar to this language that Ed quoted from the Montana codes? This kind of what the basis for the arbitration is, comparison of hours, interest and stuff. Do you have that kind of stuff in your contract or in your proposal?
That specific language I don't believe is in there. The part about city's ability to pay is.
Okay.
Or employer's ability to pay.
Thanks.
I have a question for Officer Hunsinger. Among the arguments that the city presents in their statement, which we'll all hear in a few moments, is that the arbiter might be from somebody outside of Montana and not being from our economic framework. Do I understand you to say the police have agreed that the arbiter would be from within Montana?
That is something that we've amended in our rebuttal to the city's last proposal. We have a meeting set for tomorrow morning, and that's the only issue in our proposal that we've amended at this point is, yes, we have agreed to a Montana arbitrator.
Okay, good.
For Tim Burke, please. I want some clarification about just where we are in terms of some of these other issues. Is it my understanding that you have resolved all of the other issues except your desire to have binding arbitration, or are all of these other issues still unresolved?
The only two other issues, Mr. Ellingson, that are still out there, the health insurance, which we have agreed to, the city initially wanted to charge our members $25 a month for spouses and $5 a month for dependent children to be a part of the health plan. We have agreed to that. Now it's still kind of up in the air because since we've agreed to that, the city has since juggled things around and now there's some new proposals coming out there, and there's a health insurance program ballot that they're distributing, and that's kind of another little sidebar. The other thing is the wages is still, we've agreed pretty much we initially were asking for 3% the first year, 5% the second year. We've scaled that back, and we're asking for 3 and 3. The city came back with 3, 2, and then they wanted us to sign for a third year, 2 on that. So it'd be 3, 2, and 2. Our members didn't really want to sign a 3-year contract. So those two are, I can see those, we made those contingent on getting the binding, though. So I guess the binding's the linchpin, but you're correct. Those other two are still kind of hanging out there, only because in the health insurance issue, because the city's kind of changed the rules midstream. Wages, I think we could agree to that with binding. Our members are still somewhat flexible on the wage issue if they could get the binding. We're willing to give, we've acquiesced on several different of our issues to get the binding arbitration.
So to follow up on that, are you asking this panel to give a recommendation that binding arbitration be put into the contract or not? Or are you asking this panel to give a recommendation that all of the issues which are on the table, wages, health insurance issue, and the issue of your desire to have binding arbitration, that all of those issues be submitted to binding arbitration? Okay. Can you clarify what kind of feedback you want from us, and what issue or issues you would like feedback from us on?
Actually, the only issue that we wanted feedback and a decision was on the binding arbitration. We would like this board to find that permanent binding interest arbitration be given to the police officers of the Missoula Police Association. The other two issues I think we can deal with the city, but the binding is the one that we want you to listen and make a decision on tonight, hopefully in our favor. Does that answer your question, or am I?
Yes, but just to follow up on it, if the other issues are essentially resolved and you can't agree to binding arbitration being in this agreement, are you asking the city to submit that issue to binding arbitration as to whether binding arbitration ought to be a part of your contract?
No, we've never discussed that.
I do have one more question. For Ed, in your experience with binding arbitration, the city is making some claims here about the kinds of incentive to negotiate that you have when the prospect of binding arbitration is out there. My understanding of last best, I've never experienced last best offer arbitration, but my understanding of last best offer arbitration is that if you're going to succeed in prevailing with an arbitrator, you need to be able to display a history of good faith negotiation, and that you have developed a position, that you have moved to and you need to be able to show that your position is reasonable. You need to move to the point where your position is reasonable. So the question is, if you're sitting down at the negotiating table and you know that last best offer arbitration is out there in front of you, what kind of incentive does that create for you to craft what kinds of proposals are you driven to craft as a result of that?
It's a good point, and because Tim has spoken to this as well, I don't think it takes away the incentive. I think it makes us negotiate and come to an agreement, and if we're not going to agree, we have to take into account the expense of arbitration. We have to take into account that we need to do a lot of research and have a lot of data that supports our position. And if the two positions are reasonably close from the city and us, we could lose. We could lose if we don't have good data. It's not an automatic thing. It's not something we hold back and hold on to. It compels us to bargain in good faith, and it makes the offers, it gets down to the realities of what the final offers are going to be a lot quicker or sooner, and actually saves a lot of time, typically.
Could I just add something to that? I think, like he said, when you know that everything you say and do and every proposal you make has a potential to be looked upon by an arbitrator down the road, I think it keeps you on the straight and narrow, because you have that hammer hanging over your head that you're going to have to justify everything that you say and do at the negotiating table, and you better be able to back it up, because if it goes to arbitration and you don't have the facts on your side, how are you going to explain that to them? You're going to lose.
The arbitrator has access to the negotiations histories.
Yes.
For Ed, in the firefighters' contract, 5 potential arbitrators are selected, I suppose, randomly from a list of arbitrators. Is that correct?
That's correct, but we mutually, the city and the firefighters, write a letter to the Montana State, I've got it written here, I can never remember the titles exactly, Montana State Board of Personnel Appeals. They provide us with a list of 5 names, and I don't remember if we use a coin toss, but there's 5 names we start with, and each side eliminates names until 1 remains.
And are all of those arbitrators from Montana?
Not typically, no. Our last arbitration was, the arbitrator was Eric Lindauer from Portland, Oregon.
So in this respect, the position of the police is more restrictive than the rights that you have as firefighters?
That's correct.
And for Tim, are there other arbitration clauses in the contracts for other law enforcement officials throughout the state, other police departments, the sheriff's department, for example? What does the Missoula Sheriff's Department have? Are they organized, number one? I'm not sure.
They are organized.
Are they? Do they have an arbitration clause in their agreement, if you know? And if...
To be honest with you, Mr. Ellingson, I don't know that. I believe there are some agencies in Montana that do have it. I'm not really sure. To be honest, we actually had it. Missoula Police Association had it 20 years ago, and for whatever reason, people in charge back then bargained it away. So it's not like there hasn't been any precedence for this. I don't even know if it was ever even used back then. I've talked to some of the old-timer veterans that remember it, and memories are pretty foggy as to how it was lost, and if no one can remember there ever being an arbitration with the police department.
Another question. Arbitrators are paid, aren't they?
Yes.
The strike-off system that you have, where each side strikes off two names until you get to until one candidate's left, is designed to allow both sides to eliminate anybody who is obviously biased in one direction or another. And so, given that they're paid and they do this job because they want to make money, they have a strong incentive to be neutral, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If, I have a question. Oh, go ahead, George.
I'd just like to ask this question. I think it's Tim, is it?
Yes.
You can imagine, coming from Butte, I don't read the Missoulian. And so all of this is new. It's being dumped in a barrel of ice water for me. But there are certain things that pop out no matter where you be in the United States. And one is when you make the point that this is the first time that you have not had a contract with the city in how many years, as of New Year's Day. You make that as your point. And then the second one, you talk about the feelings in the department as the negotiations drag on over 14 months and the kind of drop in morale. Those things resonate with me because those are universals. And so I don't know how to phrase this, but I'm just trying to get at what is the hang-up here in terms, is this a wage hang-up? Are there basic changes that the city administration is demanding of you that won't allow this to take place? So those are the kind of, I'd just like to get at the kind of nitty-gritty of what has you at loggerheads after 14 months.
I guess there have been obviously wage issues. This health insurance is still an outstanding issue. The feeling that I get from our membership is that the city is holding all the cards, that they're not dealing fairly, negotiating fairly, and we have no recourse except for a work stoppage or slowdown, which our members aren't real high on doing. So that's why the binding, you ask what the hang-up is. The hang-up is the binding. We feel that when things get to this point, if we had binding arbitration, number one, it wouldn't get to this point, but if it did, we could appeal to a neutral third-party person to listen to both sides. And if that person tells us that we're all wet, we're all wet. We deal with it and we live with it. But that's the main thing, is we just want to be able to appeal to someone who is not the city, who is fair, neutral, and unbiased. If we had that, down the road, we'll make our case if things go to arbitration. Obviously, you still have the incentive to negotiate, but we just feel boxed in and frustrated, like we have nowhere to turn. And a strike, they're rare with police departments, and I don't know that there's ever been one in Missoula, and I don't want to see one now, but that seems to be where the city's pushing us.
Can I add something? I'm not a board member with the association. I'm just a member of the body. My feeling from talking to other members, part of the issue is that the mayor's only been involved in the last 3 or 4 negotiation meetings, in my understanding. So we had almost gone a whole year or 10 months negotiating, and their initial offer on pay was below 3% raise. We've all agreed collectively as a union that statistically we can average about 3% for cost of living increase. We have some statistics that have shown what housing has gone up. I believe it's gone up 117% in the past 10 years, where our pay has gone up around 35% or something to that effect. So I think part of the concern was that before the mayor actually got involved firsthand with this, they were actually offering us below cost of living for a raise. Added to that was now that they were going to start charging us for health insurance, so the members in general looked at it as that we were coming out in the negative. We were losing on this contract negotiation. Since the mayor came out and talked to our association, he said, look, this is all we have, this is all we can give you. And then magically, we had another 1/4 or 0.5% that showed up. So at that point, a lot of officers felt, this has been almost a year. They've been kind of stonewalling us, lowballing us, and now all of a sudden they have another 0.5%. But even for the consecutive years or the additional years, they're still offering below the 3% average that we've agreed on as cost of living. So essentially, for the first year, with their 3%, we may be right at the cost of living increase, although with the health insurance costs, we are actually behind. And then the second year, they've offered 2.5%, which again puts, or 2% is it? 2%, which again puts us behind for the second year. So that's kind of, I think, what has led up to this and why people now are starting to get charged up about it, and why we've really made such a big public campaign and such an issue of this binding arbitration, is that it has been this long, and the general contention in the association is that, that they haven't been fair with us, because if they had, we would have received this, their final offer of 3% several months ago to get this thing resolved.
One other thing I'd like to add to that is there is a certain level of suspicion on our members with the city, with some of the things that they've done. The whole issue of wages, about 4 or 5 years ago, they decided to go to a salary survey. They would convene a committee of representatives from all the different unions in the city, one from the police department, one from the fire, and they would pick, this panel would pick the cities, the peer cities that would be surveyed. The city commissioned personnel consultants years ago to do it, and I don't remember who did this last one, but 5 years ago when they first did this, they had a list of 8 to 10 cities. This last one that they did this year, or actually last year now, they dropped about 4 or 5 of the cities unilaterally without reconvening the panel. The mayor just came in and said, well, we got to get this thing going. These are the cities we're going with now. Their claim was, and some of the cities on there that were traditionally higher paying and would have bumped the average up, the city claimed that they didn't get any response from them. And when we said, well, did anybody, call them up and ask them? It's public information. Could probably get it on the internet. They kind of looked at each other and said, well, no, we didn't. And we offered in negotiations, I said, tell us what you need, which cities you're still lacking, and so we can get a true, apples to apples from the last salary survey to this one. And we were told, well, we're not going to take outside information from you guys. So it was dropped. So things like that can tend to make you a little distrustful of how they're dealing with you.
I have a question that I think relates to a lot of the complex of issues. How close is the association to actually taking a vote on whether to strike? And is that something that's anticipated after tomorrow's next negotiation session, or is it something that's just on the table as for discussion?
Mr. Chairman, we had a monthly meeting last night of our membership, and I commissioned our secretary to take an internal poll on strike sentiment. That is ongoing. I told him I would like to see that within a week. So it's out there.
Are there any additional questions from the board members? I'd like to thank the panel for coming, and I'd like to call our next panel of testifiers.
Thank you.
I want to welcome our next panelists. I would like to have both of you introduce yourselves and then present your testimony.
My name is Carol Ann Hovland. I'm speaking for myself instead of the coalition. I wasn't able to contact some membership within the coalition for their okay. And I'm also speaking as someone who has needed police involvement several times in my life, and that's where I will be testifying.
Good evening, my name's Maggie Yobst. I am a union member of HERE. I'm vice president of that union. I am a union steward. I work at the YWCA, and I'll be testifying for the police.
Again, my name is Carol Ann Hovland. I have needed police intervention several times in my lifetime, and they've always been there for me. If police, what I see happening within the city is playing all kinds of games with cards, and they're shuffling these cards all the time trying to keep everybody off balance. So we don't know out in the public what's going on. I would be very frightened if they would have to resort to a strike. I'd be very frightened for you, for your neighbor, for anyone who needed law enforcement at a time in their life when things are crazy. It doesn't take much. You could have your wallet grabbed at the local Safeway. You could have your tires slashed. You could be broken into. If they're on strike, who's gonna come to your door and help you? That's what I'm afraid of happening. I know what it feels like to be a victim. I don't want anybody to be a victim. Law enforcement was created to protect the community, to serve the community. But yet I keep seeing the city playing it as a game, some kind of card game. Police officers and fire response people are probably the most needed people within this community. I could do without the mayor very easily, you know. Go to a city management type, you know, a city manager kind of government. I don't see where the city's playing fair at all. I say that the police officers need a system of binding arbitration so that the table is level and it's fair. It's not fair the way it is right now. I will turn it over to Maggie.
Thanks, Carol, and thank you for being here tonight. I am a foster mother. I've just become a new mother of a 16-year-old. We've had to use the police twice this last year. Once for a stolen bike, and the other time both of us have restraining orders. And those restraining orders were broken. The police were immediately there to help me, and I appreciated that. Also, I'd like to speak because I work at the YWCA. I've been there 11 years, and of course, we're the ones that have the battered women's shelter. And I was very encouraged to come tonight by people that work at the Y that are not union members, speaking for the domestic violence issues, because the police have always been there for us. We need them, and we don't need them on strike. I was told, please go and say how happy we are with the police force. We, through the Missoula Family Violence Council, we work strongly with the police, and they've always been there. We appreciate it, and we want to see this go to binding arbitration. 3 years ago, I was in binding arbitration myself as union steward. I lost my job. We went to binding arbitration. It's a little different than the binding arbitration that they're talking about, but I was in binding arbitration. We did have that system where you threw out 5 people and that kind of thing. The NLRB, National Labor Relations Board, gave us the list. We narrowed it down, both sides. It was very easy to do. It was no big deal. We came up with James Nybo from Helena, the cheapest one and the best one. I mean, it was no, you know, I mean, it just, and I found that binding arbitration was about fairness. He listened to both sides. He was very fair. I mean, there was no, it was very professionally done. And I because of this and the investigations I did with this, because it was frightening to me, I find that binding arbitration was very fair and listened to. So I do believe in that. I want to know why you would pay monies to have non-binding arbitration when neither side then, after all this arbitration, doesn't have to agree to anything. And you've spent all this money with non-binding arbitration. My taxpayer money, the union's money, and nobody gets anywhere because they don't have to agree to anything. So I don't believe in non-binding arbitration. I was fortunate to talk to a city council member the other day. They indicated they were a little scared about the cost, they were scared about this, and I don't think we need to run frightened about this. I think we just need to listen to what's gone on in the past and know that we are for the safety of this community, because that's what I'm here for, is safety. Thank you. Any questions?
Maggie, just following up on that, your last remark,
Sure.
when you were talking about non-binding arbitration, is that are you describing the city's position there?
I don't think,
I
well,
mean,
they
what the
don't.
city is saying is that they want to have arbitration, but then the city council has to accept it.
Yes.
So is that what you mean by
Yeah,
non-binding arbitration?
Non-binding arbitration.
I wouldn't even call it
And I
that,
think,
but,
well, I didn't know what else to
Yeah.
call it.
maybe fact-finding or something like
Okay.
that.
But to me, that's a
Yeah.
waste of taxpayer money. And since I'm a taxpayer, I'm interested in that money.
Me too.
Thanks. Any other questions? We thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned at the beginning of this hearing, the Montana Community Labor Alliance Director of Organizing, Mark Anderlich, did invite Mayor Kadas to testify and to present at this hearing. Rather than that having occurred, what we have received is a letter dated June 7th addressed to Mark Anderlich of the Montana Community Labor Alliance, which outlines the city's position. And I'd like to read this officially into the record. June 7th, 2001. Mark Anderlich, Montana Community Labor Alliance, P.O. Box 8175, Missoula, Montana. Dear Mark, below is a brief explanation of the City of Missoula's position with regard to the Missoula Police Association contract. In all labor contract and pay plans, the city considers and tries to balance at least the following three variables. First, we consider how the particular employees or bargaining unit members are paid in relation to similar positions in other cities of similar size and circumstances. We do this by contracting for a salary survey, which the city uses as a tool. The survey process involves selecting a group of peer cities and then surveying them for particular benchmark position salaries. The summary of our most recent survey is attached to this letter and shows Missoula police officers being compensated at 1.1% less than the median of their surveyed peers. Second, we look at how compensation for an employee group compares to how other city employees are compensated in relation to their peers. From the same table, you can see the average compensation for all city positions surveyed for is 10.3% less than the market median. Third, we consider the amount of fiscal resources we currently have and anticipate over the term of the contract. Property taxes, which make up about 50% of our revenue, are capped by state statute. As a result, we are limited in what we are able to offer any group of employees in particular and all employees in general. Our goal is to try to pay all employees at least the market median salary. This, of course, is limited by the monetary resources available to the city. The city's offer. The city has offered members of the Missoula Police Association a base increase of 3% and a matrix increase that amounts to an average of about 1.5% per employee, for an average increase of 4.5% in fiscal year 2001. In fiscal year 2001, the city set aside 4% for all non-union city employees. The inflation rate for FY 2001 was approximately 3.5%. In fiscal year 2002 and 2003, the city proposes a 2% base increase with continued steps in the matrix. This means a total average increase of about 3.5% each year. The city's health insurance fund, like health funds across the country, has had 2 very difficult years. As a result of significantly higher costs, the city has increased its own contribution by $40 per month per employee, from $350 to $390 per employee per month. We also added $470,000 of one-time money. Further, the city instituted a $25 premium per month for a spouse enrolled in the plan and $5 per month for each dependent. All non-union city employees have been paying these premiums since September 2000. In order for the plan to continue to be viable, all city employees, including police, must make equal contributions in order to receive equal benefits. Binding arbitration. The third major issue between the city and MPA is binding arbitration. The city has resisted binding arbitration for a number of reasons. First, it takes the decision-making away from the people appropriately responsible, the employer and the employees. Second, it assigns that decision-making power to an outside arbitrator, usually an attorney from Seattle or Portland, who lives and works in a totally different economic environment. The arbitrator does not answer to the electorate and is not responsible for balancing the city budget. The arbitrator can force the city into the position of having to cut other programs, including total police staffing, in order to meet the requirements of his or her decision. These are critical decisions for a community and should not be delegated to a third party who is not responsible for the consequences. Third, the city can only lose or break even in a binding arbitration because the city's last offer will serve as the floor of any decision. The city will also have been forced to expend thousands of dollars to prepare for the arbitration. The problem is that we are not just dealing with the wages and benefits of police officers. Those important issues must be considered in the context of all the other budgetary decisions a city with a limited budget must make. Fourth, once binding arbitration becomes a part of the union contract, it is very difficult to remove. Essentially, it is the arbitrator who decides whether future arbitration is desirable or not. Arbitrators do indeed bring their own personal biases with them. It is because of those biases that arbitrators are selected or disqualified by the various parties. No union is going to select an arbitrator whom they know has biases toward management. Each side makes these assumptions based on conversations with other unions and administrations that have had direct experience with the proposed arbitrators. Arbitration does take away the incentive to negotiate. If the city has made its best and final offer, the union has nothing to lose by forcing arbitration. If the union decides to force arbitration, the city's last offer is the floor for the arbitration. Even though the city has bargained in good faith and offered what it has to offer, and perhaps more, the union can do no worse than the city's offer. Under binding arbitration, the union has an incentive to at first negotiate cooperatively, but not settle, and get everything it thinks it can from the city negotiating team, then throw up its hands and turn the decision-making over to a disinterested and unconstrained third party. The city's offer of arbitration. Is arbitration really necessary? We believe not. The city and its unions always bargain in good faith. To say that it takes an arbitrator to make that happen flies in the face of what the city and its unions have experienced over the decades they have been involved with union negotiations. The demand for binding arbitration seems to imply that the city has not bargained in good faith or has not offered a reasonable contract. Yet the contract we have proposed is well within the standards set by other cities in the state and region. The MPA demands a fix that we don't believe will work for something that is not broken. We know that the City of Missoula and its unions have the wherewithal to settle contracts that reasonably meet the needs of the employees and taxpayers. Nonetheless, in an effort to compromise and close this contract, the city has offered an experiment in arbitration. The city would agree to allow arbitration that would, A, be used once, after which time it would be removed from the contract and would take the consent of both parties to be reinserted. B, be arbitrated by a person chosen from a jointly selected panel of qualified Montanans. And C, require the arbitrator's decision be approved by the Missoula City Council. The MPA has not responded to our latest offer. A negotiating session is scheduled for June 8th. The Missoula City Administration highly values our city police force. They are a group of professional, well-trained, dedicated, and community-minded individuals. We want them to be compensated in a manner that is fair to them, fair to other city employees, and fair to the citizens and taxpayers of our city. We believe that our proposal meets those requirements and should be accepted as such. We also believe that progress on negotiating a contract is much more likely to happen at the bargaining table than through a public relations campaign. Sincerely, Mike Katus, Mayor. The next part of our hearing will be to open up the floor for 15 minutes of comments from persons who are here attending the hearing. As we said, the ground rules would be each person would be required to state something new, something not already testified to. They would be given 30 seconds to make their point, and that we would alternate between opponents and proponents. And so I'd ask that opponents of the requirement for binding arbitration stand on the right side of the room, and proponents stand on the left side, and come forth at this time.
Starting with which?
Opponents?
First, to alternate in our presentation between opponents and proponents, rather than having opponents line up and all opponents speak, it's just alternate. Some opponents, one proponent, and so forth. So an opponent at first, opponent of the request to have binding arbitration. We'll give you another chance to come forth, but are there any proponents then of who have something they believe has not been said and would like to make their point?
I'm Anita Anderson,
and I'm the chair of Montana People's Action, and I just wanted to say that we recently spent 4 years negotiating with the city for a living wage ordinance, and I don't think that we can afford to spend 4 years negotiating with the city for a contract for our policemen.
Are there any opponents who would like to take their chance now and offer some testimony? Additional proponents?
I'm Ed Brunsvold, again, firefighter. I'll be very brief. I'd like to take exception with a couple of items from the mayor's comments. One of them, he says that they are lending the decision to a binding arbitrator could affect staffing, and that's something that the city only bears responsibility for. I want to tell you that the last time we went to arbitration, it was certainly talked about, the city certainly talked about laying off firefighters. When a union votes to go to arbitration, we have to look at our brothers and sisters in the eye and realize that if this is a big enough decision and this is a big enough thing that we vote to go to arbitration, we may indeed be voting to have a fellow firefighter laid off. this is not just a city's responsibility or burden, it is a burden on the members of the local as well. And so we take it very seriously. The other thing is, I want to make very quick mention is that the city has not always bargained in good faith. The mayor is an elected official, and the administrations can change at voters' whim. And in our first arbitration in 1986, I don't have a lot of the details from that, but the union filed more than one unfair labor practice, and the National Labor Relations Board found for the Local 271 in at least one of those. For information, that mayor came to their budget proposal that year was for a wage freeze across the board for all city employees, a 10% pay cut for firefighters, an $8,000 raise for the mayor. So the election process can have great bearing on ideas that are brought to the table, and I believe that having the hammer of binding arbitration over the process compels both sides to be reasonable at the table. Thank you.
Any additional proponents or opponents?
Good evening. My name is Francine White, and I'm the chairperson for Indian Peoples Action. And the urban Indian community strongly supports binding arbitration for those individuals to whom we look for protection, and our community can't afford the strike.
I'm Ed McLean, the Secretary of the Police Association. What I'd like to say is the mayor's right about the police officers being community-minded. Firstly, we don't want to do anything that would jeopardize the community or lower our level of performance. But the dissatisfaction that the majority of the body has with its employer can impact the services we provide. As far as bargaining in good faith, during the negotiation process, the city has left the table for a recess and not returned. 2 hours, they were gone. The salary survey that they promised was reportedly had errors in it, and they had to look at it again, and it was 4 to 5 months late. Now, we look at binding arbitration as the step to bring balance and fairness to the negotiations. And the alternative could impact the community by something more drastic than the police officers. And the reason we do this job, we wouldn't be comfortable doing, but there are steps we are willing to take to try to achieve that.
I'll be brief. Tim Burke, President of the Missoula Police Association. I just wanted to take exception with one thing in the mayor's statement. He says here, we know that the city of Missoula and its unions have the wherewithal to settle contracts that reasonably meet the needs of the employees and the taxpayers. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, if that was true, I don't think we'd be here tonight. It's been 14 months, we've met 17 times, and we're no closer now than we were in March of 2000. Binding arbitration is that important. Well, we trust your decision. Thank you.
My name is Allison Handler. I live in Missoula's west side. I'm from a union family. Both my parents were in unions. My dad was in television. My mom was a school teacher. They both went out on strike several times. And frankly, the idea of our safety and emergency providers not being there, being on strike when I need them, is pretty scary. I live in a union district, and I hope to serve that district on city council. I'm running for city council in Ward 2. Hope to have the seat next to Jim McGrath. I'm not sure I understand exactly Mayor Kadis's point about requiring the arbitrator's decision to go to Missoula City Council for approval. It seems to me if you've had an arbitrator who listened to both sides and gave a fair hearing to both sides and made a decision, the pressure on me as a council person would be tremendous. And I would probably not go against that decision, so it seems like somewhat of an unnecessary step. I support binding interest arbitration. I don't agree with the mayor's position in this case. Thanks.
Jim Pontrelli, Missoula Police Officer. I just wanted to clarify something that's on the table. There's a 3% raise offered by the city. Actually, originally that was 2.5%, and the chief actually cut 0.5% to give to us out of his own budget. Now they're talking about this 1.5%, this matrix. That, with 13 and a half years on, gave me 9 cents an hour. So I don't know where they're getting these figures, and they seem to be a little bit obscure, but that 1.5% was built into it for longevity. And they're trying to include that for a raise, 9 cents. Thank you.
My name is Travis Welsh. I'm also a member of the Police Association here in Missoula. I would also like to take issue with one of the mayor's comments. He has stated that he wants to offer the MPA a contract that's equal and fair to the other employees of the city. And I would just like to remind this board that members of the Police Association and the Fire Department, the Fire Association, work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We work weekends, holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries, and I would challenge any other department in this city hall to be able to say the same thing. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Mike Collier, Missoula Police Officer. I'd like to attempt to draw a line a little bit between binding interest arbitration and another very important process, maybe the most important process of our society, and that is the criminal justice system. I think they're similar. I think they're almost identical in my opinion. It wouldn't be fair for a prosecutor to just hand down judgment against a defendant with no questions asked. That criminal justice system has an arbitrator, in my opinion, and it's one of two things. It's a judge, or it's a group of people called a jury. They're detached third parties who listen to both sides. They listen to the facts from the prosecutor and the defense, and they make a logical and reasonable decision. I think a binding arbitrator would do the same thing. It's not fair for an employer with all the cards to hand down a decision to his employees without them having any say, which is the position that we feel we're in. Nobody in this room thinks that our criminal justice system, I don't think, is perfect. But I believe, and I think a lot of my coworkers and so on would believe, that it's probably the most sophisticated and the best one in the world. And I think that when you're comparing the two, if we can be tied into a system that is that thorough, I think that shows that that's a good process. Thanks.
My name is Carrie McLean, and I'm the wife of City Officer 249. I'd like to clarify, Tim Byrd made the comments about the mayor not being trustworthy. And I don't have any proof, but I can say that he made a comment in the paper about the reason some of the officers have looked to other cities for jobs, and some of them being veterans, trained with years on the force, military experience, and years of post-high school education. And he commented it was for family, was the reasons they left, not because of the lack of morale in the department. If my husband left this town to make more money for his family, yes, it is for his family, but it's because he's not making the money or doesn't have the morale he needs for his job to do it properly. The reasons the officers left were for their families, to give them a better life. But it was because they couldn't do it here because of the situation that was going on with the police department. When my husband tested for the police department 5 years ago, 250 people tested for 2 positions that were open at the time. They've had several tests since then. The last few have had less than 20 people show up for as many as 5 openings on the department. The community feels it. They know that they're not happy. You're going to lose good officers. Without binding arbitration, they're going to either strike they're going to move to different cities. They're not going to be here, and you're not going to have the quality of a force that you need to take care of a community that's growing as fast as Missoula.
We have one more minute left for this part of our hearing, so if anyone does have an additional comment, they should come forth now.
My name is Louis Ball, and some of the panel members know me, the others are lucky. I've been a union member for 40 years. And so I come from the standpoint of the union member in one aspect, but I've also worn the other hat. And I hear something here. I've worked with tools, and the tools need to be sharp. And they can stand abuse, and sometimes they have to. And we send a firefighter out there, and that's where my background comes from. Besides, that's my volunteer job, 20 years as a volunteer fireman. Then 9 years as a board member, so I was on the management side. We send our firefighters and our police officers into situations because we have more sense than to go in there. But they have the training, and they are on that edge, and they know how to react to that, and they are prepared for it. And when they're asking right now for something very simple, a settlement, so they can take the pressure off of them and go back and do their job without that additional pressure. That is something that is very important. And I'll tell you another side. I have sat and negotiated with the Missoula Rural Fire Union. And we did that, and we problem solved instead of fought. When we came out of there, we had a stronger team than we had had in years. You want to find a good feeling, go in and settle this thing and get back doing the job that they want to do and that they're trained to do and they're good at. And don't lose them. Where I work, we could have lost 7 of our instrument technicians, our newest people. Those were going to be laid off on Friday, and every one of those 7 had a job on Monday. And many of them had an increase in pay. And it took our plant 6 months to get the last 2. And we just about didn't get them. You're not going to get this quality back in here that you have today. You spend a lot of time training them, and they're proud of this town, and they'll fight for this town. But all they're asking for is a solution so they can go back to work.
I want to thank all of you who have taken the time to testify. We're going to convene as a Workers' Rights Board together to discuss the issues that we've heard, the testimony we've heard, the presentations that are read from the Mayor of Missoula. And we will come back as soon as we can within the next half hour to just tell you what we have decided. It could be that we need more time, could be that we need additional testimony, additional information, but we will come back within a half an hour to present what we have come to as a decision, at least at this point. So we do appreciate your waiting here to hear what we do have to say, and we do thank all of those who have testified up to this point.
Actually, I hope you can stick around for a little bit longer. Maybe we take a short break, but there's a few other things I'd like to talk about here. One, my name is Mark Anderlich. I'm with the Montana Community Labor Alliance and helped organize this event. I wanted to pass these around. This is one of our organizing tools, I'll Be There card. And if you come back, you don't get one of these, please sign it. It's something that we use to recruit people to show their solidarity for others in need for social justice. And we use this list here in Missoula to help organize this event. So I hope to add more names onto it. If you've already signed it before, please try it again. Pass them around. was hoping that perhaps if there was anyone else that wanted to say something before, before our audience here, wanted to show their support, or something not necessarily germane to the board, please come on up and say your support. I know there's quite a few other organizations represented here. Maybe we can have folks say who they are. I know that there's a few folks out in the hall too, so anybody wish to come up and say you're here? Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a copyright problem here. Oh, you already said? Okay. Well, one other thing I wanted to show too, one of the other Workers' Rights Board's hearings was on Grouse Mountain Lodge, and I have some brochures about that, and that's germane to us here too. I think all of you got it, but you want to pass these around? Thanks.